to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it is 6 p.m. This is Dewbs & Co, but with me, Emily Carver. Now, the Home Office have been doing quite a lot of briefing, talking to the press today. It is Crime Week for the government, and one proposal that's been going around is that in order to stop migrants from absconding from their accommodation, we should tag them with electronic tags. Do you think that's a sensible move, or perhaps a little bit unethical and unworkable from the Home Office once again? And does Britain need a wealth tax? The Labour Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says absolutely not. We're not going to introduce a wealth tax. We're not going to raise the higher rate of income tax. Momentum and other left-wing groups are not best pleased about this, as you might imagine. So what do you think? Do we need a wealth tax? Should the rich be taxed more? Now, this is a funny one. Sadiq Khan has put funding towards exclusively LGBT housing projects. So these are essentially called free from oppression, is what these housing associations say. But is that funding segregation or progress? And lastly, over to France. France has introduced a ban on abayas in schools. Now, these are dresses, robe-style dresses that Muslim women, some Muslim women, wear. Should they be banned in schools? Is this secularism gone too far? Is this against civil liberties? Let me know what you think. We've got all of that to come tonight on Dewbs & Co with my fantastic panel. But first, the latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It's 6:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong. A very good news to you from the GB newsroom. Let's get you up to date with the latest on the technical issue that has been causing a failure of air traffic control systems across the UK. It has now been fixed, but it remains unclear when the huge disruption will end. National Air Traffic Services says it's identified and remedied the problem, which has affected its flight planning system. Hundreds of flights to and from the UK have been cancelled. Many more have been delayed by up to 12 hours, affecting thousands of travellers. Well, the transport correspondent at The Times, Ben Clatworthy, says the delays, which are also having a huge impact across Europe, are likely to continue.
These knock-on effects across the day will be very debilitating for airlines, particularly when crew will be going out of hours. And what we will probably see later on today is that people will be expecting to get onto planes heavily delayed and then told, we're really sorry, but legally we are unable to fly this with the crew we have. So almost certainly huge knock-ons later today, if not into tomorrow.
Ministers are being accused of disregarding safety concerns on the Bibby Stockholm barge. The Fire Brigades Union has sent a pre-action protocol letter to the Home Secretary raising the possibility of legal action. The union has previously described the barge as a potential death trap. The government, though, insists the vessel is safe. It has until Thursday to respond to the legal letter. Meanwhile, the government's also reportedly considering the use of electronic tags to monitor asylum seekers who arrive in the country illegally. The Home Secretary didn't rule it out, but says her department is working intensively to ensure it has the capacity to deliver on the new Illegal Migration Act. Police do have the resources they need to meet a government pledge to crack down on crime. That's according to the Home Secretary, who says police have disregarded theft and burglaries for too long, despite record numbers of officers across the UK. Labour has criticised it as a staggering admission of 13 years of Tory failure. Well, Suella Braverman says the force must follow all lines of inquiry.
Police have responded positively to my challenge, my request, in committing nationwide to indeed following every reasonable line of inquiry. So that now means that in the event of a car theft, phone theft, robbery, a burglary, if there's CCTV footage of an incident, if there's dashcam footage, if there's smartphone footage, GPS tracking evidence, a victim can produce evidence of an online resale of a stolen item, the police must follow up on those leads.
Police have named 2 people who died after driving into a flooded area in Liverpool. 75-year-old Elaine Marco and her 77-year-old husband Philip were taken to hospital where they later died. An investigation surrounding the circumstances is underway. Police say they received a report of concern for a couple inside a car in Mossley Hill on Saturday. Their family says they're devastated and heartbroken. 2 men accused of a suspected ammonia attack in Gateshead have appeared in court. They're accused of murdering 26-year-old Andy Foster, who was sprayed with a substance after opening his front door on the 20th of August. He later died in hospital. Kenneth Fawcett and John Wandless were remanded in custody until their next court date. Hundreds of passengers on board a P&O cruise ship will be flown home early after it collided with a petrol tanker during a storm in Spain. This footage was taken on board the Britannia, which broke free from its moorings off the coast of Mallorca. A small number of people were injured. P&O says there was no structural damage, but it will return to Southampton with a reduced number of people on board. Prosecutors in Spain have launched a preliminary sexual assault investigation into the head of the country's football federation. Luis Rubiales is refusing to resign after kissing Jenny Hermoso on the lips at the Women's World Cup final, saying it was consensual, which she denies. He's since been banned by FIFA, the world governing body, for 90 days. The Spanish Federation has been holding an extraordinary meeting to discuss the crisis. This is GB News. I'll have more in about half an hour's time. But now it is over to Emily.
Thank you, Aaron. Yes, welcome to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver. I'm standing in for Michelle this evening. And joining me until 7 is my panel. I have Ben Habib, CEO of First Property Group and former Brexit Party MEP. And I also have former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. So I'm hoping there'll be lots of difference of opinion for everyone to respond to at home. You can get in touch with us about everything we talk about, gbviews@gbnews.com as always, and we're on Twitter @gbnews, so do get stuck in to the debates we're about to have. Now, I want to start with what's been leaked, what's been in the press from the Home Office, what's been briefed to the broadcasters, to the papers about various plans the Home Office has. They're looking at alternative ways to try and stop people from absconding once they arrive here across the Channel, and they're trying to prevent them from absconding, from fleeing from their accommodation, whether it's hotel accommodation or anywhere else, because we do know this is quite a big problem. There have been reports of thousands of Albanians, for example, absconding from their accommodation. Of course, this could be a risk to public safety. And in my view, it is the government's first duty to protect its citizens. But I want to know what my panel think about this, because lots of people have pointed out practical problems with this as a potential policy idea. Ankle tags, electronic tagging, GPS tracking. Perhaps it might help keep people safe, but is it really practical?
It all sounds a bit beyond our government, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, Bibi Stockholm hasn't housed anyone for any protracted period, and now we've got other complaints coming out about it. You know, we have a complete breakdown in governance when it comes to our borders and what we do with people who illegally enter the country. But I just want to go back to the Illegal Migration Act, which was the bill before it obviously became the Act. And when it was in contemplation, and as it went through Parliament, Suella Braverman explained the time it was taking to get that bill through Parliament was necessary to ensure that it actually did what we wanted of it. And the first draft of that bill stated that the Secretary of State would be directed to detain and then deport people who entered the country illegally. What the Act says is that she is obliged to deport and has the right to detain. And that is a marked watering down in the obligations. She would have, under the draft of the bill, been required to detain and deport. She now has the right to detain and the obligation to deport.
How can you deport without first detaining?
Well, that's the point. How can you deport without detaining? And because she's lost the obligation and only has the right to detain, she's now having to consider other mechanisms. And presumably the reason they had to get rid of the obligation to detain was because we're incapable of detaining, because we don't have the adequate space to deliver on that promise if we were to make it to the British people. So now we're looking at convoluted schemes like tagging, and there are already videos on TikTok from Albanians showing how you cut these tags off.
Yes, I think we could show these, actually. Essentially, Albanians posting, I think we could show them, well, cutting off their tags. They call them British Rolexes or something like this.
Exactly.
And demonstrating how to cut them off. So these clearly aren't fail-safe, are they, James? But the problem is that the government have committed to deporting those who arrive in this country via this route, by this irregular means, by this illegal route across the Channel. And now they don't actually have enough space to detain people before they deport them. So they're now saying that this is the way we can keep track, keep people safe, make sure we know where people are so they don't just disappear into, I don't know, illegal work, the black market, or worse. So what do you say to this?
Well, it's just the latest round of nonsense, and it's just cruel theatre. There's not any policy purpose to it at all. The issue is there's a backlog of 175,000 people who are claiming asylum, and 10 years ago there were the resources to deal with all of those cases, mainly within 6 months, and now there are not, and so they don't get processed. So that number keeps on going up. So Bibi Stockholm, for example, of course, I think it's ridiculous to put people on these overcrowded barges with Legionnaire's disease. But even if you are in favour of that sort of thing, its maximum number is 500 people out of 175,000 people in your backlog. So if they were serious about dealing with the backlog, then you would hire more translators, more interpreters, more people to process the cases. You would pay for the legal support that's required to do it, because that is the way in which you're going to be able to judge people's cases and therefore assess the level of support and help that they should be given.
James, what about
and in
the
cases where they should
particular
be
issue?
deported, then they can be deported.
What about the particular issue of absconding? Because we do know that people do. That is a fact. And we do know, particularly, it was a problem that was highlighted among Albanians who are crossing the Channel in small boats. So this is a problem that the government does need to solve. And yes, progressing with the backlog may help. But what about those who abscond as soon as they arrive?
So
that is a problem that needs to be solved, no?
I mean, as you can see, the tagging isn't going to help at all. It's just people that aren't going to abscond are going to have their rights impinged by people knowing where they are every moment of the day, but the people that are absconding doesn't do anything about. So if what you want to look at is where are people going, where are the black and grey parts of our economy, where is minimum wage not properly enforced, that's where you have to start looking. It's not about tagging and monitoring people because they will get around it. That's about enforcement of our labour laws. That's about working with trade unions to get onto construction sites to see who's working there and whether they're...
Which, to be fair, the government has recently made announcements on, although one might say too little, too late. Ben, is it fundamentally cruel and inhumane to tag people anyway, in any case?
Well, let's just get this into perspective. These people are entering the United Kingdom illegally, having left a safe country, taking on this perilous journey, knowing that they will be deported if the government is to be taken seriously, which perhaps they don't do, because, you know, our government's hopeless in delivering the promises it makes. But I don't think there's anything cruel in tagging these people. They should, in my view, they should be arrested for entering the country illegally, and they should be detained, and then they should be deported. But here's the easiest way to deal with the backlog. Stop more people from coming. Get Border Force to do what their name suggests, which is to stop the boats in the Channel, turn them round and send them back to France. And before anyone starts saying, oh, well, that's deeply dangerous, they're going to jump overboard, they're going to commit all sorts of self-harm in order to prevent the, you know, Border Force from doing its job. Remember, these people left a safe country. They paid money to leave France. They willfully, knowingly went into a dinghy making that dangerous journey. If they can make that dangerous journey 12.5 miles to our territorial waters, they can turn round and make the journey back to France. And we need to develop the political will and courage to enforce our borders. We can discuss other mechanisms by which people leave France to get to the UK. But we have to have robust border control.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it, James? Because it's all well and good talking about ways to try and stop people from absconding, but so long as people are able to take that dangerous route across to this country, the problem is still going to go on. And I'm not sure quite how much money we'd have to put into the Home Office in order to process all of these claims in a speedy and timely fashion. It is an enormous task for any government.
So just to come back on a couple of things that Ben said there. You know, we know what the result of pushbacks are, and it's fine if you think that it's people dying, people drowning in the Channel is worth paying for it, because we've seen...
But James, encouraging the trade, the more people are going to die, the more people they come across, the more people are going to die.
Because...
You've got to stop it.
No. We see what happens with pushbacks because we see it in the Mediterranean. It's now a mass grave. No, right?
It's not a mass grave.
Yes, it is a mass grave.
It's not a mass grave. The pushbacks have been done ad hoc to the extent that they've taken place.
What do you mean to the extent they've taken place? Greek government policy?
It's not Greek government policy. It is not Greek government policy to push back, nor do they have any coordinated...
So why are all the pushbacks happening if it's not Greek government policy? Who's doing the pushing back then?
The pushbacks are ad hoc, untrained...
I have some research to show you, because there are names, there are families of people who have died from those pushbacks. That's what you're calling for here.
Either you be informed
about it and you accept there will be people with names and families and faces who will drown. People, some of whom, for example, will have come from Afghanistan, who would have worked with British forces during our failed occupation of their country. They will be killed and drown in the Channel if the policy that you're putting forward is followed. Now, you might be happy with that. That's fine, but you have to accept that that is the consequence of your policy. Now, I think that... I'm very much not happy with that, and I think the British people in general terms are not happy with that, because that would mean, for example, if that policy was in place, that, for example, my great-grandparents might have drowned in the Channel when they were coming across with their boat pushback, when they're fleeing against something. It is not what our country is about. It is completely inhumane. OK, we can talk about what are the ways in which you deal with the cases when they're here. How do you help people? Who needs what support? But to just say, no, we're going to push them back, knowing that that is certain death for some people, is too great a thing to do.
Ben?
The more this trade is allowed to continue, the more the trade is encouraged effectively by the fiasco that are all the policies put in place by our government, the more people will die in the Channel. The Italian government, the Greek government, the West Balkan governments need to get together and they need to develop a trained force which pushes these boats back, like the Australians did in Operation Sovereign Borders. And if they know that they cannot successfully make that journey, they will stop trying to make that journey and we will solve the problem. As far as Afghanis are concerned, I feel very strongly about that. We went to war in a country for 22 years, leaving it in a worse state than when we entered it. But there are 4 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. If instead of spending the £4 billion that we did last year on housing and caring and feeding those that have illegally crossed the channel, we transmitted that money, because it came out of the foreign aid budget, towards meeting the needs of those 4 million people in Pakistan, we would do a much greater humanitarian benefit than we are.
This is the difficulty, because I don't think, when it comes to compassion, we talk about having a compassionate and pragmatic policy when it comes to crossings. Some people genuinely do believe that if you took a harsher stance, then it would stop people from dying in the future because it would put an end to the crossings. Others believe that that is not a risk that is worth taking, and I completely understand both sides.
And it's a cruel and violent policy.
It's worked in Australia.
Both sides of this. What's currently taking place is cruel beyond belief in terms of these people smugglers who are transporting people across a dangerous route and risking their lives. But let me know what you think at home. Who do you agree with? And lots of you are getting in touch about the tags. It seems a lot of you think it's completely pointless because people will just rip them off anyway. So there you go. But coming up, does Britain need a wealth tax, or are we all already taxed up to the eyeballs? Let me know.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. Keeping me company, I have former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. We just had a very big debate, an impassioned debate about what we do to solve the migrant crisis in the Channel, how to stop the boats, what sort of tactics we should implement. But we did start with a discussion about tagging, and Dave says the migrants will remove the tags within 5 minutes if they want to, then abscond. No way to find and fine them for removing them. Idiotic idea and a waste of money. You could say that probably about a lot of the ideas that are being briefed from the Home Office. Dale says the same. They'll just cut tags off and disappear. Keith says, can you see anyone wanting to flee from free accommodation? Well, actually, you know, if you're in there for months and months on end and you can get a job in the black market or you have family elsewhere in the country, you definitely will abscond. And there are certainly many, many cases of that. And also, there was many stories of children being completely lost from accommodation and God knows where they went to, what age they were. And Simon says, it's about time this country started issuing ID cards. Then you won't have to take... Migrants are the only people will... You'll know if people belong in the country if they have an ID card and it's able to work. It would stop a lot of fraud. Yes, but would that take away our fundamental civil liberties? It's an age-old debate. But moving on, Labour have U-turned on another key policy. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has confirmed an increase on the top rate of tax is off the table and there will be absolutely no wealth tax if Labour get into power. But is this the right move from the Labour Party? Because wealth taxes can be very popular indeed. I'll start with you, James, because you are co-founder of Momentum,
correct,
the left-wing group. Lots of pressure on the Labour Party to implement left-wing policies. Huge numbers of Labour members, I imagine, would be absolutely up for a big, fat wealth tax.
Yes, but more importantly than lots of Labour members being up for it, it's popular with the overwhelming majority of people in the country, and that's because we have incredible levels of wealth inequality in this country, and that the living standards of most people have fallen over the last 2 decades, and they can't be squeezed anymore. Whereas the wealth of the super rich and those that own a lot of assets has soared. So it seems pretty common sense to most people, not just Labour
James, it
Party
sounds
members.
a bit student union to me, though. Surely grow the pie, not redistribute.
Student union. The most student union thing I've literally ever heard is, come on, let's just grow the pie, which is actually what Rachel Reeves has said. You know, she said, oh, no, we're not going to get any more money.
She said you can't tax your way to prosperity, which, granted, does sound more conservative than Labour.
She says, I don't see a route towards having more money for public services. That is through taxing our way there. I mean, the thing is, when you do raise taxes on the top, you do have more money for public services. I mean, that's precisely...
Unless the rich leave.
Now, no, we're talking about taxing assets. So the assets are in the UK. So you can't pick up the house, you can't pick up the financial portfolio.
Its value can drop,
and they can be left. So, for example, right, let's have a look at some of these taxes, right? Nigel Lawson, no socialist, Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor, equalised capital gains tax and income tax. That means the income that you get from wealth is taxed at the same rate as the income that you get from going out to work.
And Rachel Reeves has said no to that.
And Rachel Reeves has said no to that. That was something that was Conservative government policy, very, very common sense. Everyone can understand it. It's wherever you get your money from, you should be taxed at the same level. That's been written off. That's a form of wealth tax. There are also many others, but we have a lot of issues in the country that we know. We need money for them. We also know that the wealth is concentrated at the top, so it is time to get some of that back.
So, James, I think we can all agree that, unfortunately, a lot of people have had stagnant wages. They're not earning enough. They don't have a big enough stake in society, whether it comes to property or assets in one way or another. And that is a shame. However, these policies sound great in theory, don't they, Ben? But when you actually look at what happens when you implement wealth taxes, we can look to France, for example. What happened is they had the biggest exodus of millionaires because, funnily enough, when people invest in an asset, they don't want to see it immediately depleted. And if you had a wealth tax one year, the following year, there would be less to tax.
Absolutely.
So diminishing returns is what
I mean,
I'm saying.
it's a fundamentally unfair tax apart from anything else, because you're taxing someone who has already been taxed on their income. Wealth, after all, is an aggregation of income. But the really fundamental point here is that we have had 25 years of borrow, tax and spend government. And that has resulted in GDP per capita going down, productivity going down. There is not a single metric to which you can point and say, as a result of the tax and borrow and spend policies of either Tony Blair or the Conservative government, we are now a more prosperous nation. We have taxes at a 70-year high. Finding new ways to tax people is not going to solve the problem. The highest tax bracket, by the way, in this country pay 40% of all income taxes. If you want to lose that component from society, if you want them to leave, the best thing to do is to tax them more. And there will be a smaller pie. And that's the point I think Rachel Reeves was trying to get to, which is remarkable for a Labour Chancellor, but I don't believe them. I don't believe that either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party have the courage, political will, ambition or understanding of the need to cut taxes so that the pie can grow.
Though, to be fair to James and to those who have been calling for a wealth tax, we do have a hell of a lot to fund, don't we? So we have an NHS, an ageing population. Of course, we have lots of immigration too. It doesn't come cheap in terms of resources when it comes to asylum seekers and whatnot. In terms of pensions, that's an absolutely huge cost on the taxpayer. But, James, I do actually agree with Rachel Reeves when she says this, if she does actually mean it, that you don't tax your way to prosperity and that taxes do change people's behaviour.
So
wealth creators are turned off by high taxes.
OK, to push back on a whole number of factual inaccuracies, right? So, first of all, you said if you tax wealth, there's less to tax. That's, of course, not the case at all. Let's say, for example, you have a 1% tax on wealth over 10 million. The average rate of return for investments over the last 100 years or so has been over 5%. So if your tax is 1%, 1 is less than 5, so the total wealth of that person and of those entities is still rising.
Well, that's assuming that assets always grow in value.
Fine, yeah, but hold on, we're talking in the aggregate, and in the aggregate, yes, of course they have. And wealth isn't an aggregation of income. What we're talking about here, so Rishi Sunak pays a lower rate of tax than the three of us, right? He earns more, I presume, and he is taxed at a lower rate because we have a ridiculous tax system that taxes some kinds of income less than other kinds of income.
I'm not necessarily against equalising capital gains and income tax, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I would cut both and equalise them.
Both, exactly.
I would cut both and equalise them. But James, you know, when people are taxed on their wealth, they're taxed on their income, they change their behaviour, they sell assets. It's not just hard assets like property. Property would drop in value. We've got a problem with the London Stock Exchange at the moment. We can't attract companies to list in London, in part because our institutions aren't investing in shares. If you get a wholesale exit from our capital markets because people don't want to be taxed on their wealth, you will see, James, it will happen.
Ben.
It is already happening.
Ben.
Last year, can I just finish? One point, then I'll let you...
It's just a scare story. It's just not true.
It's not a scare story.
But hang on, you look at France, they did have a massive exodus of millionaires, and the problem was, as Ben has said, people do change their behaviour if they are taxed more.
Not following
just
any
like
of the
how
taxes
young
I've suggested. Not any of the taxes I've suggested. The idea that the capital markets are going to collapse with a small tax, which we...
Well, let's see. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on because it's time to look at the weather, but please do keep your views coming in and I'll get to them in just one moment.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to the next few days, the changeable theme will continue. Most of us seeing some further rain at times, but in between there will be some sunshine. So as we end Monday, we've got this ridge of high pressure across the UK. This generally gave us a settled day today, but fronts are waiting up across the northwest, and as we go through the course of the night, we'll see one of these move into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So some showers here. For a lot of England and Wales, though, it should be largely dry, but fairly cloudy. So that will help keep most towns and cities firmly in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. So into Tuesday, we'll track this band of showery rain further southeastwards across England and Wales. Behind it, further showers moving in across parts of western Scotland. Quite blustery here too as we go through the course of the day. Probably the driest conditions down towards the southeast, but even here later on, we will see a few showers. So I think come the afternoon, possibly the best of the sunshine over towards northern England. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, most of us seeing similar temperatures to what we have seen today. Into Wednesday, I'm hopeful for a little bit more sunshine across the board, but still the risk of some showers, especially across eastern parts of Scotland, down into parts of England too. But in the sunshine, it should feel fairly pleasant, but still that keen wind up across the north. Into Thursday, a band of rain moving across many southern parts of the UK, and really that's going to continue the changeable theme as we go through the course of the week.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, we will be coming to your views in just one moment as they are flooding in on a wealth tax. But a company called First Brick Housing are aiming to build houses for specifically LGBTQ+ people. Is that progress or is that segregation?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver, this evening. Keeping me company is Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. You've been getting in touch about the idea of a wealth tax. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, says absolutely not. The Labour Party will not introduce this if they get into government. No hiking of capital gains tax, no mansion tax, etc, etc, etc. Do you believe her? Are they just saying this to get elected by more moderates? Dee says, who is Reeves kidding? It'll be dressed up under some other title/tax. Karen says, no, there shouldn't be a wealth tax. I'm not rich, but I have no problem with people that are. People should be looking to emulate those that are. I can see no logic to this view. If they think they are going to benefit from the government taking money from the rich, they are deluded. And Clive says, please define wealth. This is an interesting point. Who defines wealth? Well, surely the government would, but how low would it be? And would it get lower over time? Is it me who is retired but not on benefits? How much do you have in assets to be called wealthy? Interesting questions. Please do keep them coming in. But we're going to move on to a bit of a strange story I saw today. Now, a group called First Brick Housing have been granted £5,000 by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to build houses aimed specifically at LGBTQ+ people. So I'm asking, is this progress or some kind of segregation that's being funded, essentially, by Sadiq Khan, at least in part? I'm not sure how far £5,000 will go when it comes to housing, but he is funding it in one way or another. So who shall I go to on this? Ben, what do you make of this? Now, this group, First Brick Housing, says the housing project will ensure that those living in it, LGBT people, are free from oppression. So that supposes that
they're being oppressed.
They're being oppressed, firstly, and that housing can be oppressive in one way or another to minorities in that respect. What do you say to this?
So, I mean, the first thing to identify, as you've done, Emily, is that it implies that they are being oppressed at the moment in the housing market in some way. That is a breach of the Equalities Act. So, in promoting this project, what Sadiq Khan is immediately saying is that he is unable to enforce the Equalities Act in London. And that is an admission of yet another Sadiq Khan mayoral failure. But the other thing, which is much more important, I suppose, because we know Sadiq Khan is a complete failure, the other thing that's much more important is that you do not create equality amongst the people by identifying a particular set of people, whether that's through their ethnic ethnicity or whether that's through their religion or sexual preferences, or in this case, sexual preferences and how they identify themselves in terms of gender. You don't make people equal by identifying them and putting them in a separate category
by their sexual identity.
By that identity. Yeah. What you're doing is actually embedding division in society, saying, look, there's a whole load of LGBTQ+ houses. That's all, you know, they're all LGBTQ+. They're not part of of society as a whole, and we've segregated them. That is apartheid.
Yeah, do you know what my first thought, and this just shows the current culture we have at the moment, my first thought was, oh, God, if there were LGBTQ people living in one housing area, would they become a target?
Absolutely.
We've seen a swathe of homophobic attacks recently, which have been pretty horrific. We've known a few stabbings, at least, just in the last few weeks. James, do you think that LGBTQ people feel that they must live together, that they would be oppressed otherwise?
Well, I don't know, because that's not me, but we're talking about a very small number of people who could be. I think this housing thing is, there's a block of 19 flats is what they're hoping to do. I mean, do I think that there's probably people enough to fill that who might feel that way? Yeah, sure, and, you know, fair enough. That's fine. It's not segregation. Let's not be so hyperbolic about it. It's segregation if the state is saying, oh, trans people have to live over here.
But why do you think Sadiq Khan has chosen to fund this project? With £5,000.
With £5,000, I have no idea. I'm sure that they've got that they've filled in a good grant.
I have an idea, because it fits his sort of.
They fill in a grant form for this small amount of money. It does build on some, you know, another thing that is real, that is in in the real world, which is that there's a housing association project for older LGBT people, like sort of, you know, elder housing, which I think opened a couple of years ago with some support from the Mayor of London. And I can see why people would like to do that. It's a free country. If people want to live together for whatever reason, then who am I to say, no, you can't, no, you can't do that?
Well, I mean, you could argue that it's discriminating against heterosexual people, Ben.
Well, it is.
This housing association, or does it not matter? Is this just freedom of choice? And, OK, so Sadiq Khan's given it a bit of funding. Should we care about that? What does it say about our current culture? Identity politics, perhaps?
Well, it is identity politics. That's precisely what identity politics is, identifying a group of people and making a political, forming a political policy around them. And BLM, for example, were promoting all-black colleges. I mean, what is that if that's not the embedding of racism in society? In other words, white people can't go to these colleges. They had a play the other day in London saying white people are encouraged not to come and watch this play. What is all this nonsense?
Well, it's the idea of safe spaces, isn't it? And we're seeing it now in housing.
Yeah,
presumably, this is a safe place for LGBTQ people.
The presumption for the need for a safe place is that they're not safe.
Yeah.
And what we've got to break away from is the ostensible promotion of minority rights to the detriment of those minorities and the majority. What we need to drive home every day is everyone is equal, no matter what colour you are, no matter which country you came from originally, no matter where you were born, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your sexual preferences are, it doesn't matter.
Stirring.
You're all equal.
So I think trans people would be more likely to feel safe if they weren't being attacked and vilified on this channel and elsewhere.
Well, I would absolutely
on a daily basis.
No one's been vilified. No one is being vilified.
Of course,
people have concerns about the intersection of women's sex-based rights and also transgender ideology. That is very different from vilifying transgender people.
Trans people are and you can see it in the polling. There's polling of how people actually YouGov last week, I think, how people actually their actual views on trans people.
That's because
and then how trans people themselves feel that the public feel about them, and then how the public think that the rest of the public feels about it. And you can see there's a big divide. Most people are reasonable, decent, and they're not going to, they don't have a bad view of trans people. But because of the media environment and the political environment, trans people think that people are very much anti them, and people that aren't trans think that other people that aren't trans are anti-trans.
No, I think we are currently having a public debate about the intersection of women's sex-based rights and those of trans women, and that is the debate, and it is an important one to have, and it does not mean vilification. Yes, there will be some people who vilify transgender people, of course they will, but certainly not on my show. Anyway, coming up, France has banned the abaya, which is a loose-fitting overgarment that some Muslim women wear. They've banned it in schools. So, has France gone too far on this one?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver. Keeping me company still is Ben Habib, and we also have James Schneider here too. So just on the LGBT housing, Andrew says, I'm outraged and offended as a gay man to think that a mayor seems it fitting to pack in gay people into separate housing. Why should there be any division? Well, I mean, it's not Sadiq Khan's project, but he is giving $5,000 towards housing that is specifically made for LGBTQ people, free from oppression. So that does beg the question, are other forms of housing oppressive to LGBT people? But moving on, France is going to ban female students from wearing abayas, their loose-fitting full-length robes worn by some Muslim women, and that's in all state schools. So they'll be banned, I believe, from today. At least it's been in the French news today. They've also banned in the past kippas, headscarves, many kinds of religious dress. So is this good old French secularism at work, or is this the creeping arm of the state intruding on people's lives? And is it actually discriminatory? James, have they gone too far with the idea of laïcité, which is the separation of the state from religion?
I don't think that this is about the separation of state from religion. This is not a religious symbol. This is a type of clothing. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
It's like a kaftan. And clearly it's targeted at one particular community within the country. It's not, for example, something which is completely understandable within the concept of secularism in school, which is you can't, for example, have a Star of David or a cross or a crescent on a pendant or a necklace. That's even and equal, that's their system, absolutely fine. But this seems like it is, and it comes after a whole other types of dress which are often worn by Muslims, and particularly Muslim women, have been banned in French schools. And I think, therefore, it is both discriminatory and it is overbearing into people's individual choices.
So do you think it's anti-Muslim bigotry? Because if the dress isn't necessarily Muslim, then could you say that it is?
I reckon that if a little French white boy went in wearing a kaftan to school, they probably wouldn't take it off him. So
right, I think that's... bordering on Islamophobic.
I think that's the thing that's going on there.
Ben, what do you think?
I don't disagree with James. I think there is an element of Islamophobia going on. You know, I think France is a deeply divided country. We saw that a couple of months ago when, sadly, was it a French...
Niall.
Yeah, was shot in Paris and by the police. And we saw France effectively go up in flames over the next few days, all the way from Marseille to Calais. And it is a deeply divided country. And the way they've practiced multiculturalism and the way they've handled immigration is not hugely dissimilar to the way we're doing it in this country, which is to welcome people in, but not do it in a manner which creates a homogeneous, slow evolution of our own cultural values. What we're creating is multiculturalism practiced in silos, with people, adhering to whatever their customs, religions are, in small ghettos, effectively. And France has that in spades. And if the French government thinks They can address the problems created by those schisms through laws and regulations. What they're going to do is actually exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. So, James, the education minister in France, Gabriel Attal, he said when you walk into a classroom, you shouldn't be able to identify the pupil's religion just by looking at them. It is true, if a child was wearing an abaya, you would probably assume that they were Muslim. So isn't this just equalising the policy because kippas are banned and because crosses are banned and the hijab is banned, so therefore may as well go the whole hog and ban the whole Islamic dress?
But
that's the logic from the French government.
There is, yes, and their logic is, I think, discriminatory because there is a difference between a religious item and something which is a cultural item that some people who follow a particular religion might be more likely to wear or to have. And I think this is clearly on this side of that line, which is why it has a problem. And I think actually that Ben's making some very salient points about if you set up a very segregated society, and France is a more segregated society than ours, especially because of its housing, and it has these big suburbs outside of big cities which are very segregated off from
Although
the rest.
we do face similar
I'm not
problems,
saying, of course, Britain has many
problems.
Britain has many problems in that regard as well, but it is substantially worse in France.
Yeah, the banlieue,
And that creates, I think, really, really big problems. So rather than saying we're going to solve this by changing what some kids wear at school, they should be looking at
the underlying cause.
The underlying cause, and why is there this great level of segregation in their society? A lot of it is to do, with housing, with urban design, and these are the things that they could and should look at.
The French are very protective of their French culture. And do you think they've massively got, well, immigration and integration wrong?
Yeah, completely. Completely wrong.
You shouldn't force people to remove their religious garments in schools.
Either you control your immigration into your country to ensure that you don't create the problems which they're now trying to address, or you embrace it and you try somehow to, everyone to, again, like I said earlier, everyone needs to be treated equally. And you've got to, but the fundamental problem is they've got their migration policies all wrong, as we have in this country. But I want to just say one thing before we go.
Very quickly.
You would never have that policy made in this country.
No.
So for all those Remainers who point to Europe as some kind of idyll that we in this country have eschewed by Brexiting, I say, look at France. It's almost a fascist state, the way it goes about its business, the way it oppresses its people, the way it passes regulations like this. We are miles ahead of France. So in our human rights, in our governance, however shoddy our government is and however inept we might seem from time to time, we are an infinitely better country.
Well, there you go. There's a reminder to people who always believe the grass is greener, particularly when it comes to the Brexit debate. Thank you very much to both of you. I think it's been a fantastic show. Actually, I've thoroughly enjoyed all of those debates, and thank you for getting in touch with all your views. Just one on this. Someone did make the point that, of course, in some countries you have to abide by their dress code, but hey, we're a liberal society. Thank you very much indeed to my wonderful panel. Up next, it's Nigel Farage.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to the next few days, the changeable theme will continue. Most of us seeing some further rain at times, but in between there will be some sunshine. So as we end Monday, we've got this ridge of high pressure across the UK. This generally gave us a settled day today, but fronts are waiting up across the northwest, and as we go through the course of the night, we'll see one of these move into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So some showers here. For a lot of England and Wales, though, it should be largely dry, but fairly cloudy. So that will help keep most towns and cities firmly in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. So into Tuesday, we'll track this band of showery rain further southeastwards across England and Wales. Behind it, further showers moving in across parts of western Scotland. Quite blustery here too as we go through the course of the day. Probably the driest conditions down towards the southeast, but even here later on, we will see a few showers. So I think come the afternoon, possibly the best of the sunshine over towards northern England. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, most of us seeing similar temperatures to what we have seen today. Into Wednesday, I'm hopeful for a little bit more sunshine across the board, but still the risk of some showers, especially across eastern parts of Scotland down into parts of England too. But in the sunshine, it should feel fairly pleasant, but still that keen wind up across the north. Into Thursday, a band of rain moving across many southern parts of the UK, and really that's going to continue the changeable theme as we go through the course of the week.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly,